are various players on a basketball team. You have your guards who take out and bring the ball down the court. You have your forwards. You have your center. All of these are players on a basketball team, but each one of them do a different job. It's the same way with our students. Our students are not all alike. If you've been in education any length of time, then you've heard the phrase differentiated instruction. That means that you are varying your instruction types according to your students or according to your players. If you're talking about basketball, which happens to be one of my favorite subjects. Hello, I'm Awana Shields with Two Cute Classrooms, and this is my space for fellow teachers, homeschool moms, and or homeschool dads. And today we're talking about differentiated instruction. Let's get right into this video. You've heard it said time and time again that we need to teach differentiated instruction. Question is, how do you differentiate instructions without losing your mind? First of all, we have already said that differentiated instruction means that we are making sure we're teaching our students according to their ability levels. And the first thing that we're going to do to be able to do that is assess our students. We need to know where they are, what their learning styles are, and what our end goal for them is. And so how do we do that? The first way we do that is by giving our students an assessment. This doesn't have to be a big assessment. A lot of school districts like to do a huge benchmark at the beginning of school so they can gauge their students' levels, and you might want to consider doing that. But another thing that you have to be sure to do as you begin each unit or each new activity, give a pre-assessment. Doesn't have to be very long. It can be about 5 questions or less. But this way, you're checking to see what your students know before you begin a lesson. You call it, you're checking to see what their prior knowledge of the subject or the standard is. Once you give that pre-assessment, what you want to do is make sure that you're grading it properly. And you do this by using a rubric if you're hand grading. If you're using a computer program or a system, make sure it's keyed in correctly. That way you'll have an accurate gauge of where your students are. Also, don't underestimate the power of interest inventories. Make sure you give these the first of school so you can know what things your students are actually interested in. So as you begin to teach, you know how to have something that's going to perk their interest and get them excited about the lesson. A question of the day is a great way for you to gauge where your students' learning levels are. And it also lets you know what they retain from the lesson that you taught earlier. Part of your class can be spent teaching whole group. There's nothing wrong with whole group when introducing a lesson. I always have some whole group. I know the thing lately is to migrate towards smaller groups and individualized learning, which is great. But first start off with the whole group lesson. Introduce the lesson to your whole class first, and then you break your students up into groups. You break them up into groups by ability levels, or you break them up by interest levels. Make sure you also have a mix at some point. So it's sort of saying, it's like a fruit bowl. You brought more than one fruit in a bowl. Some days you may have all the apples together. Some days you may have all the oranges together. And some days you may have all the lemons. But then other days you might want to mix the apples, oranges, and lemons together. That way you ensure that your high level students are helping to pull your lower level students along with them. So it's almost like peer tutoring. Then that also gives them a sense of worthiness. That way they don't be like, well, you know, they can identify who's with what group, you know, because when I was growing up, we had the little robins and the little redbirds, and we all knew who each group was. You're like, oh, I'm with the little redbirds. And I knew if I was a redbird, that meant I was slow, because I looked around and saw the person sitting to my left, and I looked around the person to my right, and I said, oh, you're slow, you're slow. That must mean that I'm slow too. And kids will have, they'll start to give up when you keep putting them in the same group by abilities. They have a self-defeating prophecy at that point. So you want to mix those groups. Some days you want to work with all your lower levels. Other days you want to mix them. As I said, have a variety. When you're talking about elementary school, a lot of times they call these little groups, you put them in little center activities. They may rotate through the centers at various levels, but this is called your teacher table. This is where you put your students who need to come to you, to the teacher table together, and they're working with you in small groups. That way they can learn at a more relaxed. Before we go any further with this video, be sure to get a like, a thumbs up, and to subscribe to my channel. Back to the video. We want to make sure that we're presenting our lesson in a variety of ways. We don't want to just stand up and talk all day, which is the type of education I received when I went to school about 5 years ago in high school. Let's be real. I've been teaching 20 years, so. But anyway, when I went to school, our teachers would stand up at this podium and give us lecture. They would lecture us, and we took notes. Well, that doesn't work anymore. So, not saying it doesn't work at all, but that should be your whole class. You should present the lesson in a variety of ways. You should present the lesson in a way that is visual, so your students can see it and understand what's going on. You want to make sure that you have some hands-on, something that they can manipulate. I like task cards. Of course, I think a lot of people think task cards are more for elementary and middle school students, but you can use task cards with higher level students because it gives them something to interact with. You might want to let them do some research. You've taken care of the visual. You've taken care of the hands-on. Auditory, you want to make sure that you're speaking at some point. You might want to show a film, a video. Have them go out and do some research. All of these are ways that you can vary your lesson so that it reaches a variety of your students. And research has shown that we remember things that we can associate a picture with. So the more you can incorporate something visual and things that are tactile into your lesson, the better your students are going to be able to remember what you're talking about. And all this is a part of differentiating your instruction. Another way that you can get your students to remember what they learn, you know, like I said earlier, people associate things with images. If you can get a picture, but also a key teaching technique that you may not have thought about trying is telling a story. Tell a story. That way your students can associate the concept with that story that you told. So if you're talking about the solar system, you might want to talk to them about a time when you had a solar eclipse. As a child at school, you were warned not to look at the solar eclipse. It's going to do this to your eyes. It's going to do that. And you might want to let them go out and do some research. But storytelling is an awesome way to help your students better retain information. Before you introduce a concept, make sure you activate your students' prior knowledge. See what they know already and activate it. What do they know about this subject? What are the basics that they need to know in order to get this other concept? So do a quick run through the basics and build, add your building blocks and build up to what it is you're trying to teach your students. Incorporate some pop culture. Now, I am doing another video on how you can use pop culture to help your students learn and remember concepts better. But that's all for another video. But incorporate some pop culture. Allow your students to talk about issues that are going on in society at the moment. And roll them around. Figure out a way to whip those around full circle to what you're trying to teach them in your class. All these are great ways to get them to remember what you're talking about and a great way to differentiate your instruction. When we are differentiating instruction, we want to make sure that we have a gradual release of information. You know, not all of our students are ready at the same levels. And to ensure that we're not leaving anyone behind, we gradually release it. And we had a concept in education that may be new to you, maybe not, but it's called I do, we do, you do. So you're gradually releasing them. I do it. I show you how to do it first. You watch me. Then we do it together. And then I release you to go do it on your own. So when you're talking about differentiated instruction, you are gradually releasing your students to become independent learners. You're releasing them to do those concepts on their own. Writing is a key component that I think is often overlooked when you talk about teaching students concepts. Unless it's a writing class, and that's just not the case. Whether it's English, social studies, science, or even math, you can have your students do some writing. Writing about a subject will also help them to remember that subject. Have them to justify, have them to explain it, have them to summarize it. All these are ways that you can differentiate instruction and get your students to better remember the concept in which you're trying to teach them. So what is differentiated instruction? It is tiered instruction. Instruction that hits on various levels, lower level, middle level, and the higher level. This is what differentiated instruction is. Know the end from the beginning. Know exactly where it is that you want your students to go. Know what overall message you want them to take away from your lesson. Once you know that, then you can formulate a plan as to getting your students there. We're talking about differentiated instruction. We're not talking about just throwing a ball down the middle of the court and hoping someone catches it like they do in basketball. But what we're talking about is having intentional instruction that's geared towards the various levels of our students. Again, this was the Wonder Shoes with 2 Cute Classrooms talking about differentiated instruction. And be sure to like this video, give it a thumbs up, follow, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next video.